Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our virtual roundtable this afternoon on housing facilities. My name is Grant Walters. I'm the Director of Educational Programs here at the Akuhawai Central Office in Columbus, Ohio. We welcome you. Thank you for taking time out of your days today. There are about 500 of you out there watching this right now. So thanks so much for registering and taking part this afternoon. We really appreciate that. A couple of things that I'll go over just before we get started. Well, first and foremost, we want to thank our colleagues at NERSA and ACUI who are partnering with us during the webinar today. And you'll get to meet some of their professionals that have been involved in their associations, as well as some of our folks with Akuhawai that you probably know fairly well. We are this afternoon, we are going to be doing virtual roundtable style. A couple of things that we want to make sure that we point out before we get started are some of our online resources that are available to our members. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel at the very end. It'll probably take about a day or so for that to happen, but you'll be able to go back and rewatch this or share it with a colleague. If you'd like to do that, we hope you will. We've had a long series of these webinars and virtual roundtables over the past few weeks. We hope you found them really useful and timely. We really enjoyed putting them on for you. So thank you for joining us if you've been with us before. And if you're here for the first time, wonderful, welcome. Other things for our Akuhawai members, we also have the online community. Today, you'll see a lot of questions being floated out. You'll also see chat functions that will be part of your platform here on Zoom. I'll give you a little bit more instruction about how to use those and what we're going to be doing with them today. But this is a great conversation to continue on the online community. We do have a housing facilities online community that's a part of that. So if you've never used the online community before or you're a regular, great. We'd love for you to log on. And it's a wonderful place for you to get your questions answered and get feedback from your peers. So we hope you utilize that. We also have a page that we published very, very early on during the public health crisis on COVID-19 resources. And if you go to the front page of our Akuhawai website, akuho-i.org, you'll be able to see some of those. It's links, hopefully, that you can use to helpful information from health authorities, from other associations with whom we partner, and some things we've learned along the way. So thank you for utilizing those in advance. Again, we hope you find them helpful, and we encourage you to utilize those as much as possible. Today, we're going to introduce our panelists. We'll go back and do I'm going to do a really quick introduction right now, but we'll go back and they will introduce themselves with some more detail. Today, we have Mallory Sedaris, who's the Director of Housing at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. April Hicks Kovalenka, EDD, Executive Director of Housing and Residence Life at, oh goodness. April, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to figure that out. At the University of Central Florida. We will fix that right away. And then Dr. James Bridgeforth, who's the Director of Housing at the University of South Alabama. We have Dr. Justin Computero, who's the Director of the Husky Union Building at the University of Washington. Giancarlo Brunolo, Associate Director of Event Services and Campus Center Operations at Stockton University. Stacie Hall, PhD, who's the Executive Director of Student Engagement and Development at the University of New Hampshire, and Bill Crockett, who's the Acting Assistant Vice President for the Division of Student Affairs. He's also the Executive Director of Campus Life Services at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. So we welcome them. We thank them for their time this afternoon and in advance for sharing their expertise. We know that they're going to have a lot to contribute, so we're excited to get started. A couple of things to note about today. Some of you may be used to our previous webinars where we've done a lot of formal presentations that involve a PowerPoint with a lot of lecture style sort of information. That's not what the virtual roundtables that we're hosting are. They're conversation based. We're going to get started with a few questions that we'll ask each of our panelists to answer just to sort of get the things moving. But this will be an opportunity for you all to connect, and I can already see questions rolling in, which is wonderful. So you get a chance to be a part of the webinar. We may answer your question via the chat function. We'd ask the easiest way to send those or via the Q&A function. So you'll notice that there's a little sort of folder looking button that says Q&A with a Q on it. That's the easiest way to submit questions to us that we can track and manage. We'd really appreciate you doing that and using it for that function. So we'll begin with some general things, but we'll get to your questions. Given how many people, we're up to 473 folks in the room right now. We only have an hour, so our ability to get to all the questions today may be limited. So know that if we don't, we will host more webinars for facilities professionals in the near future, where hopefully we can answer more questions and get some more perspectives for you all. When you're submitting a question from the audience, again, use the Q&A button. It's really helpful for us if you state your name, your position, your institution, along with your question and comment. Some of our facilitators may be looking at the window. They may type an answer to you if you submit a question. You'll also notice that other folks in the audience may answer your question as peer support. And so we've had a lot of that over the past few several webinars where people have been so helpful in giving their feedback and perspective. And so we'd love to see that continue along the way. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back here. We're going to get started. So we'll get started with Mallory, who's going to introduce herself, a little bit about what she does at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, and then a little bit about the current status of her facilities on her campus and what they're being used for. So Mal, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Hi, all. I'm Mallory Stacie. I'm the Director of Housing at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Our campus is ending week 2 of off-campus virtual learning, and our halls are mostly empty. We closed on the 21st of March, but we are allowing a handful of students to stay that don't have anywhere else to go. So we still, out of a population of about 2,600, have around 350 still living with us. They are consolidated to our areas with apartments so that they do have kitchens and a little bit larger living space available to them. We have completely closed our dining facilities on our campus. So we are offering like a pack your pantry kit where a student can essentially buy 14 days worth of food and get that and take that back to them. So we are really running with not much of anything open at the moment besides our housing facilities, and then staff that are on the ground continuing to work with those folks. So we've been pretty at the front end of keeping things closed and keeping people off our campus, but that's where we are right now.
Great, thank you so much. April, we'll go with you next.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. April Hicks-Konvalinka. I'm at University of Central Florida. Thank you, Grant, for changing that. And we have roughly about 500 students out of our 11,000 students that are on campus with us right now. The week of spring break for us was March the 9th, and shortly, I guess at the end of that week, our university told students not to return to campus. And so at that present time, we had about 2,000 that were on campus, and we were able to dwindle down that number to 500 who had extenuating circumstances. And so our students have not been back to campus since they left for spring break. And so that was the beginning of March. We have 6,000 that need to come back to get their items. But right now in the state of Florida, we're under a stay-at-home order, executive order, until the end of the end of April. And so right now we're at a standstill as to when we're going to invite students back. It's just not safe to bring to campus. Our dining facilities we do have one that's open for the 500 that are on campus. We're actually looking at providing meals to those students who are currently on campus right now, and supporting any student who needs support during their time here. Many of the students that are here, their extenuating circumstances range from no place to go to it's better for them to be here, or they had someone at home with health. They were immune compromised, and so we are taking it day by day here, just as all of you are. But I'm very glad to be with you today.
Wonderful, thanks so much, April. James Bridgeforth from the University of South Alabama.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. As I said, I'm James Bridgeforth. I'm the Director of Housing at the University of South Alabama. I also have the pleasure of serving on the COHI Executive Board as the Director for Facilities and Physical Environment. So that's been a joy. Our campus right now is like many of you. We are into week 3 right now of basically the remote operation. Our students started this process pretty much around March the 12th. And at that point, like many campuses, we asked students to not come back to campus, but housing had about 430 that needed somewhere to be. So they're with us. Over the last 3 weeks, we've been reducing that number. So now we're down to about 180. So we have about 1,450 students that need to come back to campus to get their things. We are actually, as of this week, from a housing perspective, running a complete remote operation. No one's in the housing office, and we're doing a personless checkout, which really is working out pretty well for us. And so we're continuing to monitor it, and we're just starting to talk about summer school now. Our dining hall, for those students that are here, it is open, it is functioning, but it's only functioning limited hours out of the day, and it's a to-go program where they grab and go, and that's been working out pretty well as well for us.
Wonderful. Thank you, James. Appreciate that. We'll go with Justin next.
Hi, everyone. Justin Camputero at the University of Washington. We are finishing week 4 of being closed. We had the unfortunate distinction of being the first university to go all online and start closing down. And so we were making it up as we went, and hate the fact that across the country, we now actually have partners and trying to have to figure out these solutions. But we are totally closed, working remotely. We are operating with some critical staff in the building to support the other critical staff across campus. In particular, we've partnered with facilities because we have large spaces that they can social distance, even break rooms. So we've been kind of creative in how we're operating, but we're remote like everyone else and moving forward.
Perfect. And Giancarlo.
Hi, everybody. My name is Giancarlo Brignolo. Everybody just tends to call me GC for short. I am the Associate Director for Event Services and Campus Center Operations at Stockton University in New Jersey. So like most folks, we too are also all working remotely. However, our campus center does remain open during this time. Part of that is because we do have some dining facilities located in our building, but also our food pantry that serves some of our students that are still remaining on campus, which is about 180 students. That's still open to help support those students who are in need. From a programming perspective, we have postponed or canceled all programming through May 31st, with our June events and so forth being reevaluated at this time. And we are currently not accepting any additional event reservations as it pertains to the usage of our facilities. So like Justin, we are working with our facility folks to help maintain our campus center at that point. But for the most part, all of our staff are working remotely. Thank you.
Thank you, GC. Appreciate that. And we'll go next to Stacie Hall.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacie Hall. I use she, her pronouns. And my title that's on the screen there doesn't really share very much about what the scope of my responsibilities are, but I started at University of New Hampshire about 8 years ago overseeing campus recreation. And then within the last year, I started to oversee the student union as well. And here we closed the recreation center on March 18th. And we did end up closing the student union on the 20th. We had similar aspects that was just mentioned there about having dining available in that building, but we decided to close that on the 20th. And then on the 22nd, we learned that our local hospitals were looking for surge space. And so between the 22nd and the 27th, last Friday, we created an alternative transition site in our recreation center. It was initially going to be an alternative care site, but the hospitals decided they wanted it to be a transition site, which means that is for folks who had been in the hospital and then are about ready to get released from the hospital, but the hospital wants to focus on the more sick patients. So those who are kind of getting better, they would send to our facility here and then hopefully head home from that. And so we do have one dining hall that is still open, with anticipation that that dining hall will service the folks that do stay in that alternative transition site. And then we also have been consolidating the folks who are on campus. We have about 100 students on campus, and then all of our hall directors into one building to free up other buildings to provide for, we're still kind of working this out, whether it's going to be staff who are working at this alternative transition site to stay, could be first responders, things like that. So we've been freeing up space to repurpose those spaces. But I'm excited to be here with you this afternoon, and it's really great to see all three of our associations coming together.
Great, thank you. And Bill Crockett. Oh, Bill, you need to unmute.
And I'm the first one to be technology challenged here. But good afternoon, everyone. Bill Crockett, University of Maryland, Baltimore. I just came into the role of Acting Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs on March 10th. We closed our facilities down on March 13th. So you can see it's been a lot of transition here. But my main function here is the Executive Director of Campus Life, which is including all the campus life and student affairs facilities. And in that role, I oversee, or I support campus recreation, our union, our event services, our res life, our food services, and our auxiliary business enterprises in that capacity. As I said, on March 13th, we closed the rec center, the campus center, our event services shut down, our food services shut down on March 13th. Our housing is still operating, but we are in a role where we have encouraged the students to move out, but we also, due to our international population, and the University of Maryland, Baltimore is a health sciences campus, which means we support 2 teaching hospitals. And we are 90% graduate and professional students, which means we're the university system's medical school, dental school, nursing school, pharmacy school. So a lot of the first responders are either teach our students or support our students. And then our students also support some of the volunteer efforts. So we have a lot of individuals that are still working through our university hospital that need housing support. So we're in that transition where we now have our students who can electively move out or moving out. Those that intend to stay have to give us notification, and we're supporting them, and we're looking at how to reconfigure our housing spaces to make sure that we've got social distancing, and we can try to take some of our larger suites and disperse folks out into rooms that do empty. And that's the process that we're in now.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, some of you have already spoken to this a little bit, but I wonder if it's good for us to talk a little bit about essential staff. And so residence halls, unions, and rec centers obviously have essential staff that are still reporting to work, that can't work remotely. And so one of the questions that we have is, how are you supporting them and trying to make work safer, knowing that there's a risk in them being involved and coming into work when they don't have the option of working remotely?
I can start. So at UCF, all of our residential staff, they are remote work. They're working from their apartment. We have some that are working in their office and not interfacing with students. And so if we need to interface with the student, it's via email or a phone call. Right now we have a very low number, and so there's not a lot of interaction. Our facility staff and maintenance staff, of course, are very concerned about interactions with students at this point in time. We've been working with our EH&S team and also our health services team to help educate them on how they protect themselves. And so whether it be utilizing the right PPE and how to utilize the right PPE, and just minimizing any interaction that we possibly can. I know that we've had some challenges in trying to get some spaces clean because of the fear that many of our staff have at this point in time, but it has helped to have EH&S involved in that process and helping educating them, ensuring they have the right PPE, and bringing in our health professionals to speak with them as well.
So this is James. I can go next. We have in our program, most of our residence life housing staff is essential. So the professional staff, they're all working from home for the most part. But the custodians, we really wanted to work with them specifically because their job is very challenging and sometimes they could find themselves in a particular room. So we got all of our mechanics and custodians trained and tested and fit for the N95 mask and able to utilize those. But basically what we're doing with our mechanics, we're coming in right now in spaces and addressing them 3 days out of the week, really at this point, and they're only focused on common areas right now. If there is an issue in a student's room per se, then we will deal with that, but that hasn't come up. Our mechanics, they are all actually at home, but we have a rotation each day where there's a mechanic that comes in to address any work orders. We've been very fortunate because when what we're trying to focus on now is trying to figure out a way to address the summer term process. For our other staff members, we literally closed our office and asked them to work remotely and only go to campus if they need to, and that's been working out pretty well. And we're continuing to train that staff. We had decided at first to actually prepare all of our hall staff members, including our RAs, to be trained with the appropriate PPE and even get them N95 masks, but we thought that wasn't the right thing to do, so we changed that perspective and now just really focused on our mechanics and custodians. So right now, the morale is pretty high. Things are working out pretty well. The one thing we did take into account is a timeline if they were going into empty rooms per se. And we decided we'd wait at least 3 days after someone is checked out before we even will address that room in any way. And that has been very helpful. And we also have a medical facility or hospitals within our campus. And so we've taken some guidance from our infectious disease expert on how we prepare them and how we train them. And so it's been working out pretty well so far.
This is Mallory from SIUE. I mean, similar for us, I think one of the bigger things that we immediately had was our facility staff obviously had some concern with going into occupied spaces, but we still have residents here. And so we've addressed that by trying to identify things that maybe we could help them with over the phone, getting creative. And we had somebody that submitted a work order for their light, like in their kitchen being out. And so that conversation with the student was, can we drop you off an extra, like, can we drop you off a floor lamp and some light bulbs instead of coming in and replacing your kitchen light? And so, and the student was completely fine with that. I think most students understand that as well. So trying to get creative in some of those solutions that we can, making sure for the things that we have to go in there, our staff are prepared and have the appropriate PPE to do that. But I think some of that thinking outside of the box and some of those interactions and talking to students has been helpful for our folks to feel heard as well. We're also trying to minimize the time that they're on campus. So they're technically on call, but if it's a work order that can wait till tomorrow, maybe we have another one there, they're making one trip on and doing that. So some of those things have helped us to, with our facility staff as well.
This is Bill from University of Maryland, Baltimore. Some of the same challenges on our housing side, we've also been addressing those same things with how to handle routine work orders versus urgent and emergency work orders through our facilities management crew. We do still have students doing teleeducation. So we did have a situation where lights had to be replaced that may have considered been routine, but we've actually had to make sure the student could successfully teleeducate from their domicile while on campus. From the rec center standpoint, we did shutter the rec center down, and I've actually worked with our central controls to put us in an unoccupied mode, bring the lighting down, bring the heating down, bring all utilities down, because we're going through a robust exercise to do student refunds during this process. And the rec center and the Union Campus Center are all funded through auxiliary student support fees. So I'm trying to also use this strategy to minimize some of the expenses during this period to cover some of the gap that we're going to start experiencing. But we still have one EVS person, that's our housekeeping janitorial services, that's in the facility both for the Union and both for the rec center. And that's just to at least have some touch so that because we still have maintenance crews that come in and out, that at least bathrooms are still touched, there's some sanitation being done, that when we do come to recovery, we're not coming out of mothball status, and we've got a lot more to catch up if not. But we are, again, minimizing contact and all that. Our rec staff are very central to our program, but I had them all classified as non-essential for pandemic, so they're not on campus. So they've got great concerns like what's happening with the pool, what's happening with the aquatics, how's the water chemistry, how's all these other things that are happening within the facility. So I myself was classified as essential. So I make stops and visits to the facility to catch up. And we're working with our facilities management to also do routine inspections to make sure that some of the infrastructure and some of the big heavy lift on the mechanics are still being maintained.
I want to jump in and just add one thing, and not from a facility perspective, but more thinking about from a personnel perspective. So for us a lot, and I know many, about even just pay and being able to maintain staff levels. So University of Washington, we're on a temporary ability with administrative leave during our stay home order by the governor, but we're also cognizant that we're trying to minimize any furloughs or full layoffs in the process. And so we've actually have, as staff are comfortable as well, we have a little bit more expanded critical staff level, especially on some of the operations side. And we're rotating actually some building coordinators who are coming in to manage the facility, like I mentioned during my intro, to be able to help support others who are using the building, who are critical staff through our facilities, so that they're able to continue to social distance and use it. So we did a complete disinfection of the building and had some time, and now we're operating our kind of our dining area as a break room for facilities because they have absolutely nowhere for that critical staff to be. So we're bringing in limited 1-2 staff at a time to be able to maintain those operations with them and still be able to keep staff in a payroll status without having to furlough anybody. So that's just another element that hasn't been mentioned that we're doing.
This is Stacie, I'd like to share a couple things building on what's been shared already. Around the staffing piece, after we closed the rec center and the student union, in order to help keep our housekeepers from both departments employed, I redirected them to housing and helped as the move out process was happening. Each day, a certain number of students were able to have a schedule to take their belongings from their res hall room. And so there were many buildings that needed to get cleaned every single day. And so I think that helped give them something like actual work that really needed to happen urgently. But one thing that I've noticed that my staff's focused a lot on is really helping to support their kind of mental health, I guess, of our housekeepers, because the stress of what we're asking them to do is so significant, and just all the different news that's out there and trying to decipher what's really true and what's rumor. And that's been a lot of an area where we spent a lot of time. I also wanted to build on something Bill mentioned in terms of the facilities. We intentionally drained the indoor pool to stop that from running because we already had maintenance scheduled in there in June anyway. So if that was a really significant way to cut down costs. And we had also already scheduled to turn off our ice arena, which I also manage here. Although that I'm having some maintenance done on right now because we might have to turn that back on if that needs to become a surge for morgue support, which is a conversation I never thought I would ever have as a professional, but that is a reality that we're planning for.
So for our part, again, kind of as I had mentioned during my opening, we have absolutely no staff on hand from the campus center operations crew. So even our facility coordinators, they are all working remotely. And our cleaning crew is managed by our facilities department. So they have been working to make sure that our building stays operational, but at least we are grateful in the fact that because most of our, in fact, all of our events have been canceled, we're not getting a lot of foot traffic in this space. Again, the foot traffic tends to just be limited to our dining hall and to our food pantry, which is run out of our Dean of Students office. So again, personnel only go in there as needed and as necessary. But that's about the extent of what our personnel are looking at. Again, we just wanted to make sure that we try to minimize as much of the foot traffic into our campus center as possible.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for those responses. We have Brian Fitzgerald, who's had his hand up very patiently, and so I'm going to allow him to ask his question live. So, Brian, I'm going to take you off of mute here, and you can ask your question of the group. Brian, are you there?
You hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. You sound good.
Thanks for encrypting this, because our student government had a session last night and it got bombed in. So they got to see some very interesting pictures. But my question for those of you who are perhaps working with a medical facility, either for patient care or housing for medical workers, are you charging for it, or are they paying for it?
So I guess I can speak first, being that we are the home of the University of Maryland Medical School, University of Maryland Medicine, and University Hospital. We are not currently housing the frontline staff yet, but we are preparing that if we need to use our residence halls for that opportunity, we will, and we will not be charging if that comes out. There is some discussion because one of our facilities, our largest facility, is a P3, and we're going to have to also make sure that the contractual arrangements allow for that, but we've got a great partnership and we're planning on utilizing that space. But being in downtown urban Baltimore, we're also very fortunate that we have a lot of hotels that surround us that are also willing to lean in to help with those type of services. And like Stacie talked about her facility, and I guess she can talk about it more, about being converted to a medical-based secondary facility. That was talked about with our facility too, but the convention center is right next to us and it's got more square footage than we could ever imagine. So we've already converted our convention center in downtown Baltimore to a auxiliary medical site to work with our university hospital. We still have a lot of postdocs and we have residents that live in our facility. So we allow those individuals that work through and that are university employees or hospital employees can also live in our housing. And we have about 5% of our housing is occupied by those individuals, and they will continue to still live in housing. We've given them exemptions to remain.
Any other responses to Brian's question?
I think I'll add something. This is Stacie Hall from New Hampshire, where we did transition to an alternative transition site. And honestly, I haven't been involved that much in the budget piece. I know that there has been a lot of arrangements to adjust the facility and the surrounding facilities to meet the needs of our hospitals, and that a budget is being submitted to the state. So, but I'm not really sure what's going to happen funding wise. I think there's hope that there will be either federal or state funds to help fund that, but this is moving so fast that it's really hard to get clear answers.
Stacie, thank you. I should have put in there, we are tracking expenses though, and we've got an expense code for our university financial systems, specifically for COVID-19, that we're tracking all related expenses, so that if there is any funding through either state, federal, or other sources as we're moving quickly through this to support us either in the real time or in post time, we are tracking those expenses that if there is a possibility.
Great, thank you so much, everybody. So Aaron Flynn from the University of North Dakota and a few other folks have had some questions about what you see as the reality of facilities management and operations, things that are changing because of COVID-19 that you think will create permanent change, when things may settle down or return to whatever status quo might be down the road.
This is James. I will take a stab at that one because I think we're talking about it often. One of the things for us that we didn't talk a lot about is the mental health side of the facility staff doing the work. And for many of our campuses, those employees are sometimes the lowest paid employees, and what it looks like to work not a regular shift. So I think for us, it's going to be about trying to find ways to make sure that we can protect the mental health and prepare in advance. I don't think that many of us, I can speak for me, we didn't talk a lot about pandemic preparedness and planning. And so I think for us, we will always be talking about it and planning about it and always have a plan in place. I think the other thing that will change forever is how we approach PPEs for our staff members. I don't think that we've ever thought that we could be in a situation where we would run out. And I think our housing facilities team was really ahead of the game trying to get some of the masks. I mean, they were trying to get them really, really, really early, probably as early as January, not because I was aware of it, but they were aware of it, and they were having a hard time trying to find what they needed even then. So I think trying to prepare for that. I think the other thing that's going to change our business forever is this idea of how we as a university may need to work remotely and how do you manage a facility remotely. And I don't know for many of you, but for us, it's been very difficult to determine, what needs to be done. Like, can we give the light bulb to someone at their door, as Stacie said, or is it we need to go replace the light bulb? So trying to create essential, I think we have essential operations, but what are the essential facilities management things that need to be done in the event of a pandemic? And so I think those things will change how we do our work from here and forevermore. Well, I think we'll always remember this and think in advance about how do we prepare for it and plan for it.
I'll jump in a little thinking about student unions, and I don't think I mentioned this in my intro, but I have both facilities as well as student activities and student government under my responsibilities. And I think a little bit of, we're never going to go back to normal of what normal was before. So it's what a new norm will be. There's going to be long-term, we all know, financial impacts, a lot of the unknowns about what enrollments will be across the country, and budget cuts and pieces like that. So some of the impacts long-term are going to also be the typical world of what happens in potential recession time periods and what those financial impacts will be. The other thing I've been thinking about is the fact that in higher education, we have a tendency to say that we work at a glacial speed, and we are proving that we can do otherwise. We can move very, very fast when necessary. So I think that as an excuse is going to go away. Obviously, none of us have probably implemented the perfect operation to function remotely, but we've produced something. Even faculty have produced something, and those of us and thinking programmatically and student engagement virtually have produced something. So imagine what we can do when we do have a little bit more time. So I do think part of the new norm is going to be quelling that we can move faster than we say. And I also think the other element is thinking about how do we support accessibility from a virtual standpoint, and that programs can happen virtually. But I also think that this is going to prove that students more than ever need the bricks and mortar, that we're not all of a sudden higher education is just going to become a virtual commodity. We are going to need to be together. Community needs to happen in all three of our associations, and our universities and departments function on community building, and it's going to prove more than ever that we need that. But now we have to figure out how we have a blended hybrid of virtual from an accessibility standpoint, and how do we do in real life, in person programmatic elements. And so I think I keep talking with my staff about the really neat opportunities to think about what does remain permanently or hybrids after we're done of all of these new programs and services that we're offering virtually.
This is Stacie. I just want to build on what you were just saying there, Justin, because from the programming side, from both campus recreation and a student union, I feel like providing things virtually has always been something we'll get to down the road, and we've never really invested time on how can we figure this out, and what is going to work with our students today and what isn't going to work. And now we're put in this environment to kind of force us into that. So I think we'll learn from this experience of what it is we do want to continue once we can get back together in person on our campuses.
And this is Bill from University of Maryland, Baltimore. Stacie, that's exactly some of the things that we're experiencing, that we've taken our time to get to this place. and now we're forced to be there, and we're really ramping up our learning and our capacity. I do also agree with Justin. I'm hearing from our students and our staff who really want to get back. They want to get back sooner. That, we always had this discussion in student affairs that we're student facing, we need to be here for our students in real time, in real space, and create that space in place. And there was always this challenge of what does telework look like from a student fair lens? Well, we're also seeing that it can exist. So I know when we return, there will be some type of hybrid, that we can find some norm where we have the face-to-face engagement, but we also have the ability to do this remotely and still create the engagement, still create the opportunity, and build in new capacities and build in new opportunities that we probably were resistant to in the past. What I've also seen is that from a rec standpoint, we still always have what I call the non-land-based students, whether they're remote or they're distance education already, and we don't really reach out well to them in the real time now. This gives us a chance to meet all of our students where they're at, try to find ways to engage, find ways to continue their student success. And then when we come back, I hope that we continue that engagement across those non-land-based students that are remote to us or that are doing the distance and online learning.
From a campus center perspective, I think one of the things that I have been really reflecting upon has been our student employees, and just the realization of how important these jobs are to them. Other than Res Life, we are probably the second largest employer of student employees, and unfortunately, we were not able to offer them the opportunity to work remotely. And just kind of the outpouring from our students as far as like how they have been so dependent upon these jobs for an income, and the fact that they're not able to find work outside of the union because everything has been practically shut down. I think that is going to change the face as far as how we think about balancing the health and wellness of our students, but then also trying to help support them fiscally, especially those that are so dependent upon these jobs, for whether it's paying for the cost of their education or for their housing or something along those lines. So I think that that's something that's been a very interesting line that we've had to kind of think about and talk about, has been balancing the health and wellness of our students as well as the fiscal need of some of these students as well.
And this is Bill from UMB again, and I just want to jump there because I want to give a shout out to our leadership on campus in this whole thing that's going on with student employment. That very early on, before we even got to shut down, our provost, who at one time was our chief student affairs officer, so that gives a lens and a lean into where we were at, but approached us very quickly saying, what are you doing for student employment? And we were very quickly in student affairs saying we would like to keep continuing to compensate, pay, and support them during any shutdown. And it was as quickly as this, give me the plan, we'll make it happen. And it did. So we're able to support all of our students, both work study and non-work study, with their average amount of hour per pay up through May 23rd. So we know through May 23rd, when we get through this academic year, our students will not see at least a loss of the income that they were expecting to get through the support through campus employment. And they don't have to telework, and we're encouraging very little telework because we want them to concentrate on teleeducation. Getting their requirements or education and getting used to this new normal is so important that we want to make sure that we're not putting an extra stressor on them. And by making sure that they're being paid, we're also removing another stressor when we deal with all the insecurities that they have to address on a day-to-day basis. But we are still encouraging opportunities to engage, to connect, to check in, right? We want to check in, make sure they're okay. We want to check in to make sure that, is there any way we can lean in and support for their success? And we want to take the opportunity that when we can provide learning, right? Learning that will help them grow competencies or abilities or expand some other factors. Let's take an opportunity when we can, when it's not taking away from what the main part is the teleeducation.
Great, thank you, everybody. We've had a few questions come up. Rosio and Angie Rie have asked questions about summer operations and knowing that impacts unions and rec facilities and residence halls. What are some of the conversations you've been having about summer camps and summer operations? What are some of the things you're considering as to whether or not those will continue on? So if you can maybe share some of those things that you're each contending with on your campus, that would be great.
This is Mallory from SIUE. On the housing side, we are actively having that summer conversation because we already have students asking to come and live with us in the summer. So while there are students that are not thinking about that, there's a lot of students that are. In our experience, we still have students that are living on campus because they don't have a permanent address to go home to, or they're an international student that now there's financial concerns about whether or not they can go back home. So I think for us, it's having the conversation of that we have to have, there will be a summer program, but because there's still going to be people that live with us just like they do now. And so kind of helping to frame that conversation with our facilities and res life and operations staff that it might look a little bit different because we're so used to the way our summer runs, that maybe we won't consolidate everyone to 4 buildings because are we really going to be talking about consolidating to get everyone in jammed packed? Probably not. And so some of those things are a little bit different and trying to shift our lens of that. So we are thinking about the location of those people, knowing that we still have some people that are here that likely will need to stay, having those conversations about would we take new applications at that point? Like if we're still at a stay-at-home order in our state, what does that look like? So we're having those conversations. And I think there's also the facilities piece. I've seen this come up a couple times in the Q&A and over in the chat, is that we still have students' belongings with us. And so that is kind of the next big thing on the conversation is how are we going to address the belongings that maybe people can't come back and get, you know? The local student or somebody within a couple hours away, once there's a stay-at-home order lifted, can maybe come and get their belongings. The student who went home to Arizona likely doesn't want to fly back to Illinois to get their stuff in June to come back in August. So we'll have to address how we're going to handle those so that we can do our summer operation and get into those spaces and do those maintenance and cleaning. So those are some of the things that we're talking about on our campus as we start talking about summer.
We're not under a stay-at-home order yet in Alabama. I feel like it's coming in a day or so. So one of the things we did with our students is we felt like when this decision was made, they were on spring break and we asked them not to come back. So for us, we thought we would give them an opportunity to come back in a big window of time. So they have until May 8th, which is our initial hall closing, to come back and get their items. They have to schedule it. And I share that to say, you know, we're hoping that everybody will be able to come back before that time and check out. Right now, we're checking out in the last 2 weeks, about 500 people a week is what it looks like coming back to get their things. That will really inform what we're doing for summer. Today, we launched, so your question is timely, we launched our summer school program. Our summer school will be online. So for us, we will allow students to live with us, but it will be extremely limited, and it will be something that is really a hardship for them. So I think one of the things that we will do is house any of those students in all private rooms in a single loaded corridor building that will have a external entrance. So almost like a micro apartment style, if you will. So that's the approach we're taking. And our thought process is that everybody will be checked out of that building. We're hoping, if everything goes well, May 8th, and we're not going to reopen it until June the 2nd. So we'll have 3 weeks to clean it and nobody will be there. So we think that's accomplishable. And we're also talking about, as people check out, can we turn them over that way? For summer conferences and summer camps, that decision's still being made. I don't think we'll have any on our campus in May or maybe June, but some of our bigger camps and conferences are in July. So I think that's still being determined. But I think the approach to summer school is ready and it's out there, and we're calling students as effective on Monday to talk them through about if those who've applied, if it's something they really need to do or if it's a hardship for them.
So I know that we've canceled all events through the end of May 31st, and events from June 1 on have been decided on a case-by-case basis, but we're actually discovering that our external conferences are actually canceling on us. They are taking the position that they feel like it's not safe yet to go ahead and have their events. So they are taking that initiative to just reach out to us and let us know that they are no longer having their summer conferences or their summer events on campus. But I do know that our first 2 summer sessions have gone online, and we are actually looking into potentially going to an online orientation model as well in case we have to get to that particular point. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Perfect. One of the other questions that's been coming through are working with campus student organizations and groups, and since unions, rec centers, and residence halls are completely connected to those and rely on a lot of those connections with students. Have you been able to have conversations about your operations and getting their input, or being able to involve them in some way, shape, or form? Has that been possible?
I can jump in. So, and again, we have student activities in our area. It has been, a lot has to do with the timing of, so University of Washington is on a quarter system, and thinking about the previous question, our summer doesn't begin until late June, because that's when the sun actually appears in the Pacific Northwest. And so all of this has been happening for us over finals week, dead week, finals week, and spring break. So unfortunately, we've had some limited conversations about how we were going to launch spring quarter, which started on Monday for us. With those student organizations, we've been mostly in conversations with them about the impacts on their programs, because that's their biggest concern, and trying to help many of them think creatively, how do they move their programming online versus what cancels entirely. And what some of their needs are. I actually just got off a call this morning with our student union advisory board about this exact topic being our primary conversation early next week, of how do we as a student union, as a department, not as a building, continue to add value to the student experience during this time period? How do we help support student organizations, our student government, and what kind of programmatic efforts are we putting out there? So we're in the starting points of using those outlets as well as student government to be able to ask those questions, with kind of saying, here's what we've done so far, and here's what we put into play. And I've asked my staff to kind of chunk things out. So the first month, we've got some ideas of programming, just because we know we want the students focusing on their education as well and not have to worry about any of the programming, even though I know they want to. And then so now it's going to be about what else can we do for you to enhance that experience and build community. And it really comes to what our purpose is. What does community look like virtually? When many of our faculty are doing their classes asynchronous instead of live, students are really, really looking for some live interaction, even if live is on a Zoom call, to talk in person. And so that's what really we're spending time thinking about, because that's the messages that are coming back with student organizations.
And this is Bill from UMB. I can talk a little bit about the student government. So our student government is approaching closely to their last meeting of the year, and they've never done anything virtual before. So this is going to be the first time they're launching in a virtual aspect. And it's kind of daunting for them. And we're leaning in, and our director that oversees the student leadership and governance aspect she is leaning in as hard as possible to try to make sure that they're supported and they feel comfortable in this new realm that they have to operate within. But it's also the final meeting where they do their elections for the officers for next year. So even trying to figure out how to go from where they would do a clicker type of vote in person to create a online vote that still keeps the anonymity that they want, follows procedures, and also has the flexibility to conduct elections under their bylaws, which isn't a normal, without going into any detail, it's not a normal bylaw election process for those that follow those type of things. But it's also an opportunity, because our student government represents all students, including the online students and the distance education students and the remote campus students. And they've never had a way to engage those students before, and all of a sudden now they're engaging them. So I've looked at this as also an opportunity for governance to really lean in, step in, and take a leadership role for all students at UMB.
Yeah, Bill, I want to jump in real quick too, because we just had this conversation with our Senate. Our senators are really, really excited because they said, actually, this is going to think about accessibility more than they've ever had before. So they're excited about, going back to an earlier question, of the long-term ability to be more accessible to students within Senate. And really just helping them to also think through, what does leadership look like from a student government perspective in a time of crisis? You know, we have a mix of students who are certainly feeling a bit paralyzed of what the norm will look like during these 11 weeks for us. And others that are excited to realize that they have a unique and very special opportunity to lead and to represent students and their needs in this crisis time period. So again, a mixture of students and knowing where they're at and what their needs are is where our students are at.
Yeah, I want to just give a shout out to all the folks who oversee student staff. I think that the work that you folks do is just utterly incredible. And I think it's so important, especially in this time right now, as kind of all the panelists have talked about earlier, just staying in touch with them. And, you know, even though, you know, you may not have the staff there with you in person, I think it is just continuously important to just check in on them and make sure that they're doing okay. And that, you know, that's kind of why we all chose to get into this field, was to work with students in some way, shape, or form and have an impact on them. And I think that that's the important factor here, is just that little check-in. And even for some of the folks who are not technologically savvy, I've been so proud to see folks that are just even taking the initiative to call students and just check in on them. And I think that that is just so important. Because really, outside of the academic field, I think it's the supervisors of students who are really the ones that students turn to in that time of need, and that they are the support for those students. So I think it's so crucial to stay in touch with them and make sure that they're doing okay, even if they are not physically there or on the payroll anymore.
Great. Any other thoughts on that question? Well, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I know that there are a lot of questions sitting out there, and there's been a lot of chatter in between attendees, which has been wonderful. So thank you for doing that. I wanted to just end our time here by allowing each of the panelists to sort of give any final words of wisdom, a thought, an ending thought, word of encouragement to their colleagues, anything that they'd like to share to sort of wrap up. And so we'll just sort of go with whoever would like to start.
Well, I'll give my final thought here, and what I would stress to everyone is that we will be returning to campus, and we will be returning to campus sometime in the near future, whenever that date may be. But as we get ready to return, and we think about recovery, and we think about what's in front of us, let's not forget, when we get back, to celebrate the staff that are returning, celebrate the students that are returning, celebrate coming back to what we would call our space and place. So I think it's really important to start that planning now of what these celebrations should look like.
Bill, I think that's a really good point. And I would like to add, in the meantime, it's extremely important to take care of you and your team. For those who are working remotely, I'm sure you're spending most of your time in front of your computer and less time getting up, going down the hall to visit someone. And so I think it's really important during this time, as we are stretched in many, many directions, that we are taking care of ourselves, checking in with our staff, learning how you can support them. They desperately need that now. And in addition, advocating for what's the priority in the moment. We certainly have had many, many things happen all at once, and sometimes we just need to pause and ask what's the priority, because I can't do it all. So take care of yourself, and also take care of your team.
Yeah, this is Mallory from SID. I would second that. I think that's been very much, we have to still think forward, like summer's still happening, fall's still happening. How do we think about what this looks like in this new reality, which I think while we will be back, that we're gonna see lingering effects for a long time. And so how do we balance thinking about those things and what those impacts have on our organization, with also having those good conversations with staff and encouraging folks in those moments that they may feel frustrated or like they're not doing this. And this is hard. It's hard to be working in a different space. There's people with different challenge. Like I have 3 little ones. They don't make this easy all day long working at home. So giving one another some grace has been a good conversation, has been something that's been frequent with our staff as well, and encouraging them, and also asking folks to do things that they haven't done before, and honoring that they can do that. And so that's what I would think about, those people and the things that they might be good at, and the folks you know in your staff, and how do you support them while we're not physically in the office.
Yeah, I'll just echo what everyone else is saying, but also say a thank you to our professional organizations like ACUHO-I, NERSA, and my family at ACUI, and just how they have all responded to all of this. But also it's been fantastic just to see the collaboration amongst all of our professional associations as well. I think that that's a great resource, and thank you to all those folks who do work in these associations to help keep the rest of us sane and grounded. So thank you to all those folks.
I would just echo really what Mallory said. I think it's really important to give your employees some grace. It is, for many of them, it's probably tremendously difficult to manage children, work from home, and keep up with the projects. And so just trying to be kind and be thoughtful about that. I think that's one of the things that will help them also realize we'll get through this as well, and continue to encourage them that we'll get through this. But that grace for them can be tremendous, because while many of us are dealing with many different pieces and parts, some of them are just trying to figure out how do they manage in this new world, and haven't had the courage to say that to you or I. So that would be my advice. And again, I want to shout out to the panelists and ACUHO-I for doing this, and the other professional associations that joined. Thank you all for coming.
I'll jump in. Again, I think echo ditto for all of that. And I think something I heard in an earlier webinar of another one, which is really about patience with all of our staff and all of our students and all of our faculty. So many faculty are figuring this out as well, and realize that the expectations for productivity are probably going to go down, and they need to go down as we're balancing everything we're doing. But there's still an expectation that we are adding value to the student experience, and just having an agreement of what that looks like for our staff and when we can engage with our students is really important. And I want to overemphasize the communications, because I have over communicated to our student employees and to our student organization leaders, and I've gotten so many responses of appreciation that they just feel at least they know what's going on, and that they know they're cared about. That sense of belonging and sense of community is so vital of what we do. And so really just encourage folks to communicate and over communicate those needs. And the final piece is just, I want to emphasize the piece of, when they do let us open our doors, let's not just let it be, we open the doors and hey, we're back to normal and like nothing ever happened. It should be a big celebration to say we're back together. It really, I'm already pulling a planning team to say when we open the student union, it's a party. It's like back in 2012 when we reopened after a construction project down for 2 years, because it needs to be a big deal. So, and I just want to echo thank you for the invitation, and thanks for being on this great group of panelists for these conversations. I love seeing our associations collaborate together.
I think I agree with what everyone has shared so far. One piece that many of you have alluded to, but I'm going to say a little bit more directly, is as we've been supporting our staff in helping them try some new things, we as the leaders in different leadership roles we have on campus, we need to be really intentional about how are we changing how we're interacting, and how are we communicating, and what tools are we using, and what tools do we need to learn to use in order to support our staff through this experience, along with our colleagues. Because I think one of the things I really appreciate being in student affairs is how we can rely on each other so much, and how we can learn from each other. So thank you everybody for being part of the panel, and all of you for listening and asking questions.
Perfect. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. I agree the partnerships that we have with ACUI and NERSA have been invaluable, especially as we continue to go. April, did you get a chance to go yet?
I did.
You did. Okay. We really thank you all for being here, and all of you who attended again, 500 people who took time out of their day to join us. Somebody had asked if we'll be able to make the remaining questions available for some sort of discussion. So I was able to copy the remaining questions that were in our queue, and I'll find a way to put those on the ACU Hawaii online community for people to respond to. And I'll also make sure our friends at NERSA and ACUI get a copy of them as well, so they can make those available to their members in some sort of a forum where people could respond to them and see what was asked. So thank you for all the wonderful questions and for submitting all of your information, for sharing with your colleagues. We really appreciate that. Again, we'll have a couple things happening next week. We'll have a new straw poll coming out for ACU Hawaii members. This has been something we've done recently, a little bit more frequently, so we can capture some immediate data about what our institutions are doing to contend with different parts of this crisis. So there'll be something coming out early next week for you to respond to. And institutions have found that to be a really valuable way to gain sort of immediate feedback and data that they can use on their campuses to help make decisions, to share in conversations, and to help guide them. We'll have one virtual roundtable coming up next week on Tuesday, April 7th. People spoke at length today about having staff working remotely. So the webinar that we're going to have next week is about building community from afar and how it's possible to do that from a leadership perspective, and for supervisors to have some things in their toolbox to be able to work with. We'll have some more webinars and virtual roundtables the week of April 13th. Those will be announced very soon via the ACU Hawaii website. So watch the front page for more information, and those will be listed as soon as we can get them available for you. We want to make sure that you know that, again, this will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. Feel free to go and download it, share it with colleagues, pass the link around to anybody that you think might find it useful. ACU Hawaii would love for you to continue to use the online community or join us for the first time. And again, our list of COVID-19 resources that are available to you all to help provide some guidance during this public health crisis. Thank you for attending. Thank you so much for everything. Once again, thanks for our panelists, and we'll see you all in a future webinar. Bye, everybody.